In the seventh lesson, we're going to finally come back to what we've already read in this study, back in lesson 2, which is Colossians chapter 2, verses 6 through 15. Now, in many ways, the rest of Colossians 2 is the core of Paul's message to the Colossian church, and to remove or to have a faulty understanding of what he communicates in this chapter is to fundamentally miss the point of really the letter itself. As you probably remember, we established back in lesson 1 and 2 that the core issue in the Colossian church is very reminiscent of the issue of Acts chapter 15, where you have these Judaizers, these Jewish believers, they are Christians, who seek to hold the law and grace in tension with one another. And they are going into the churches and they are teaching the Gentiles that before the Gentiles can become true believers, they have to adopt the practices of the law. So they're sort of inadvertently, or really intentionally, depending, sabotaging the teachings of Paul and the other apostles, after Paul and the other apostles have already established these churches. They're going into the churches and they're sort of complicating the teachings quite a bit. And much of the debate revolves around whether the Gentiles have to adopt the practices of the Mosaic law from the Old Testament. Much of the drama in the early church revolved around these former divisions between Jew and Gentile. And the message of the gospel that people like Paul taught was that Christ has torn down those previous barriers and is building the two together in this new entity called the church. And Paul really writes Colossians to set the record straight for the people at Colossae. And he is very concerned, the Colossian believers, as he says in these verses, that they are not distracted by these other teachings, that they are not caught unaware by these false doctrines regarding the gospel, like those preached by many of the Judaizers. And the core of what he is trying to get them to understand in these verses is that Christ has supremacy over both the law and Gentile rulers. And that's a very key theological point. Jesus takes supremacy over both the former divisions of the law and the present Gentile rulers. Through his death and resurrection, Paul explains, Christ conquered and humiliated the Gentile rulers. And if the believer has faith in Christ, with Christ, then they have fulfilled the requirements of keeping the law through Christ's death on their behalf. So the law is satisfied and Christ holds supremacy over the Gentile rulers. And now his present position is beyond any Gentile power to reach. That is verses 9 through 12. It's a very key point. And that is how the believer then understands that their position and their inheritance is safe with a victorious Christ to be awarded at Jesus' return to earth to restore rulership.